This week's episode of This Is How We Roll is a special about type 1 diabetes. Hello, I'm Ruth, and welcome back to This Is How We Roll. Today we have our first guest host, Joe Clark. As you know, a focus of this show is to shed light on all disabilities, so today he's going to be talking about diabetes. Hi Joe, how are you?
I'm good, and thank you for having me on the show.
You're welcome. So, about how old were you when you found out that you had diabetes?
Well, it started out when I was about 2 years old. I went through this diabetic phase, as they call it, which is a very rare thing where my blood sugars would run high, but not high enough to diagnose me. And eventually that went away, which is a very rare thing. It does not normally happen, and even the doctors were confused about it. I lived the rest of my life as I normally would, as any kid would, and when I was 14 years old, I went back to the hospital, and that's when I was officially diagnosed.
So what are some of the symptoms you experience from diabetes today?
Well, as a diabetic, I have to manually monitor my blood sugar, which could mean if I don't do it correctly, I could go high or I could go low. These affect me in similar ways, but can be different. With a high, my throat dries out, I crave water, I need more insulin, that kind of thing. With a low, it gets much worse. I become dizzy, I become nauseated, I can't stand up straight, and when it gets really bad, confusion sets in, and it gets to the point where I'm almost completely useless. I can't help myself at that point. There have been times where I couldn't figure out how to open like a can of soda. That's the scary part of it, really, is the lows that can get really bad, and if they keep happening, your body kind of naturally adjusts to that, and when your body's used to being low, it could lead you to kind of keeping it too low, and that can be dangerous.
Is there anything you can do to help regulate or ensure that you don't have a high or a low?
Yeah, I have this device on me that's called a diabetic pump. It pumps insulin into my body, which is the drug that uses to bring blood sugar down. It's also a drug that it's a chemical your body naturally creates. Mine doesn't. That's one of the reasons I'm a diabetic. My body stopped producing this chemical called insulin, so I have to manually put it in to my body. And with diabetes and being an athlete especially, that only works so far with the pump. You can't have it on all the time. So constantly checking your blood sugar, getting a continuous glucose monitor or a CGM is a great idea to get started, especially if you're young and especially if you want to be an athlete. Getting those two things, in my opinion, are the greatest way to stay safe while you're either exercising or if you're playing a sport.
Thank you for sharing that. If you don't mind me asking you, is there any challenges that having diabetes has posed to your life as far as things you want to accomplish?
Yeah, as a lot of people who know me know, I want to play football in college at the collegiate level, and with diabetes, there's a level of commitment that you have to have, and it has to exceed those who aren't diabetic. You have to go in knowing the fear that something could happen, which everyone has that fear, but it's more shown to you as a diabetic. There have been times where my blood sugars dropped so low while playing football that I've had to have been hospitalized. And that next practice was the hardest practice of my life. Going back after knowing that it could be bad, it takes a level of commitment that a lot of people don't have, which is why you see a lot of people who become diabetics stop playing sports. And in my opinion, that's one of the worst things you can do. Yes, there's those challenges, there's those fears, but a lot of those challenges are in your head. As long as you follow the rules and if you keep your blood sugar monitored, you can always push through it, which is something that I learned. And while a lot of people in my life didn't support me continuing to play sports because of it, those people who did, my mom, my dad, they allowed me to keep that commitment and push through those fears, which otherwise would have stopped me from committing to the sport that I love.
I'm really glad that you were able to stay committed to your sport despite your diabetes. So, Joe, if you don't mind me asking you, is there any life lessons you feel having diabetes has taught you?
Well, again, going with it's a constant push against whatever you're doing, especially in athletics. So I had to, from an early age, in my opinion, at 14, I had to push through what I felt and what a lot of people feel is a death sentence to their athletics, where they're scared to ever go through with it. And this drive, this competitive nature that I will never be the best because I can't learn to be the best, so I have to be the most aggressive. I have to, say in wrestling or in football, I have to end plays quicker. I have to end matches quicker because, especially in wrestling, those 6-minute drives where you're constantly moving are very dangerous going into the 5th and 6th minute for a diabetic. And you'll see, if you look through my wrestling matches, that there have been countless times where matches had to have been stopped or I've been pinned because I was extremely low and couldn't get off the mat to get food. So I learned very early that you had to finish it early, which is both a kind of a blessing and a curse. Learning to drive, constantly get what you want and finish what you're trying to achieve as fast as you can is a good thing. You have to have that drive in any aspect of your life. If you want something, you can't let anyone take it from you. But it also gave me this inability to have patience, especially when working for something. I found very early that when it comes to things outside of sports, I wouldn't put in the work because I had conditioned myself to end it early. Where, even though I could have continued wrestling, I would go for dangerous shots in quotations that put myself at risk to get pinned or to get a takedown for the other person or put myself in a bad position because I thought I had to end it early, which near the beginning of my wrestling career, I guess you would call it, was true. But as I progressed and going into my second year, I didn't need to do that. And it was kind of hardwired into my brain. Don't use technique, go for it. And that is something that is very dangerous. But that drive that came about it very early is something that I'm still using and will always use to this day. That just because you can't do it now doesn't mean you can't do it forever is another lesson I've learned. But one of the big things is keep going. Everyone will push you down. There will always be something. Don't stop working for it.
That is a really good life lesson to have learned from your condition and kind of a good way to take a negative situation and make it positive. Is there any final things we should know about your condition or any wrap up you'd like to say?
It can be dangerous, and there are some people who have unfortunately died while being a diabetic. I don't know of any of them who were doing athletics at the time, but I do know that there was another kid who goes to my school who was a diabetic who did end up dying because of it, which everyone took very difficult. It was one of those that all the seniors who were there knew him, and it was very hard for those people. So, yeah, it can be dangerous. But it also can be a great opportunity because no one expects me to show up. No one expects me to be the best. No one expects me to dominate to a degree that I know I can. So it gives you that opportunity to show them wrong, which is something that motivates me personally. And while that might not motivate you, you might not be that person who enjoys proving those people wrong. You can do it. You can get through diabetics. And I urge you, find a sport that you love. It doesn't have to be wrestling. It doesn't have to be football. It can be track. It can be tennis. It can be fishing if you're weird. I don't know anyone who actually does fishing as a sport who's a diabetic, but you do you. But if it's something that you love, don't let diabetes tell you no. Follow the rules. Yes, there will be scary moments, but I guarantee you'll make it out and you'll be better for them.
Thank you so much for being here today, Joe, and I hope to see you wrestling shortly. That's it for this episode. Until next time, remember, we're all different, so just roll with it.